Jack Reacher stepped off the Greyhound bus into the suffocating humidity of Devereaux, Louisiana. The town smelled of stale beer, fried catfish, and something else, something cloying and sweet that reminded him of decay. He hadn't planned to stop here. A faded newspaper article tucked into his pocket, a brief mention of a soldier named Sergeant Miller, was the only reason. Miller had served with his brother Joe. The article was an obituary, short on details, long on platitudes. Accidental death, it said. Reacher didn't believe in accidents, not when it came to men like Miller. He walked, his only luggage a foldable toothbrush and a passport. The town square was dominated by a whitewashed courthouse with a clock tower frozen at 4:17. The silence was heavy, broken only by the buzz of cicadas. People watched him from behind twitching curtains and from the shadowed doorways of rundown shops. Strangers weren't welcome here. Their gazes made that clear. They were looks that measured, weighed, and dismissed. Reacher was used to it. He was a big man, a ghost who left no trail, and that made people nervous. His first stop was the local diner, a place called the Bayou Bite. The air inside was thick with the smell of grease and burnt coffee. A few patrons hunched over their plates, their conversations dying as he entered. He took a seat at the counter. A waitress with tired eyes and a name tag that read Sadie approached him. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice flat. "Coffee, black, and a slice of that pecan pie," Reacher said. She nodded and moved away. Reacher scanned the room. In a corner booth, two sheriff's deputies were watching him. They were big men, gone to seed, their uniforms straining at the seams. One had a thick, drooping mustache. The other had a shaved head that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. They weren't trying to be subtle. Sadie returned with his coffee. "You're not from around here," she stated, not asked. "Just passing through," Reacher replied, his voice a low rumble. "Looking for some information about a man named Miller, Sergeant Daniel Miller." A flicker of something, fear, maybe recognition, crossed Sadie's face before it was replaced by a practiced emptiness. "Don't know him," she said, a little too quickly. She turned to leave, but Reacher's voice stopped her. "He died a few weeks ago. The paper said it was an accident." "Lots of accidents happen," she mumbled, wiping down a clean section of the counter. The deputies in the corner shifted, their attention now laser-focused. Reacher took a slow sip of his coffee. It was bitter, just how he liked it. This one involved a fall from a construction site. The old paper mill they're supposedly renovating. Sadie's hand trembled slightly. "I don't know anything about that." The bell over the diner door jingled, and a man in an expensive suit walked in. He had the slicked-back hair and predatory smile of a man who owned everything he saw. The deputies straightened up. The man, who Reacher would later learn was the town's de facto ruler, a man named Marcus Thorne, walked directly to Reacher's spot at the counter. "You're asking questions," Thorne said, his voice smooth as silk but with an edge of steel. "In my town, people learn to mind their own business." "I'm just a traveler," Reacher said, not looking at him. "Curious is all." "Curiosity killed the cat," Thorne said with a thin smile. "And in Devereaux, we have a lot of dead cats." He gestured to the deputies. "Hale, Carter, escort this gentleman to the edge of town. Make sure he finds his way." The two deputies, Hale and Carter, lumbered over. "You heard the man," Hale grunted, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered pistol. Reacher finished his pie, placing the fork down with a soft click. He turned on the stool to face them, his sheer size making both deputies take an involuntary step back. "I haven't finished my coffee," he said calmly. The air crackled with tension. Hale's hand tightened on his weapon. Carter licked his lips nervously. Thorne's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then, Reacher stood up, towering over them. "All right," he said. "Show me the way." They walked him out of the diner and pointed him down the main road, the one leading out of town. "Keep walking," Carter said, trying to sound intimidating. "And don't look back." Reacher walked. He didn't look back. But he didn't leave. As soon as he was out of sight, he circled around, slipping through back alleys and overgrown yards, moving with a silence that belied his size. He needed answers, and Devereaux was holding them tight. He found the local library, a small, dusty building run by an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. She seemed less intimidated by him than the others, or maybe just more resigned. He asked her for back issues of the local paper. He found the article about Miller's death again. The details were sparse. He died at the old mill, a property recently purchased by Thorne Industries for redevelopment. The project was supposed to bring jobs, to revitalize the dying town. Reacher had a feeling it was bringing something else entirely. He looked for more articles on Thorne and his company. He found glowing pieces about his generosity, his commitment to the community. It was all too perfect. That night, Reacher found his way to the construction site. A high chain-link fence surrounded the decaying paper mill, but the lock on the gate was cheap. He broke it with a single sharp twist. The place was a skeleton, rusted metal, groaning in the wind. He found the spot where Miller had supposedly fallen. There was no blood, no sign of a struggle. But there was something else. Scuff marks on the concrete, not from a fall, but from being dragged. And near the edge, a small, glinting object. A military issue button, the kind from a dress uniform. Miller wouldn't have been wearing his dress uniform to a construction site. Suddenly, headlights swept across the yard. A truck pulled up, and two men got out. They weren't cops. They were big, hard-looking men, carrying heavy flashlights and something else that glinted in the moonlight. Reacher melted into the shadows, his senses on high alert. The men did a cursory check of the perimeter, their beams cutting through the darkness. "You think he'll come back?" one of them asked, his voice a low growl. "Thorne said to make sure the place is clean," the other replied. "The big guy at the diner today. Thorne's worried. Said he asks too many questions." They moved closer to where Reacher was hidden. He held his breath, every muscle coiled. They passed by, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Reacher knew then that Miller's death was no accident, and Thorne was at the center of it. He needed to get closer to understand what Thorne was hiding. He spent the next day observing, gathering the town's rhythm. He saw the fear in people's eyes when Thorne's men were around. He saw the trucks, heavy laden, moving in and out of the mill at odd hours, their cargo covered by thick tarps. No construction materials he'd ever seen looked like that. His investigation led him back to Sadie, the waitress. He caught her at the end of her shift in the alley behind the diner. She flinched when she saw him, ready to run. "I'm not here to hurt you," Reacher said, his voice calm. "I need to know about Daniel Miller. He was your brother, wasn't he?" Tears welled up in her eyes. She nodded, a choked sob escaping her lips. "They said he fell. But Danny, he was careful. He was a soldier. He wouldn't have just fallen." "What did he know, Sadie?" She hesitated, looking around nervously. "He got a job at the mill, security. He said something was wrong. The shipments, they weren't right. He said they were bringing things in, not out. He was going to go to the feds. He told me that the night before he died." "What were they bringing in?" "He didn't know for sure, but he said it smelled like chemicals. And he saw Thorne meeting with men, dangerous men, not from around here." Her story confirmed Reacher's suspicions. This wasn't a redevelopment project. It was a front. He needed proof. He decided his next visit to the mill would be more thorough. But first, he needed to deal with the deputies, Hale and Carter. They had been tailing him all day, a clumsy, obvious surveillance. Reacher led them on a long walk to the edge of town, near a dense patch of woods. He stopped, turning to face them as they approached. "Getting tired, boys?" he asked. "You're a hard man to lose," Hale grunted, trying to sound tough. "You're not trying very hard," Reacher countered. The confrontation was short and brutal. Hale threw a punch, a slow, telegraphed swing that Reacher easily dodged. He disabled him with a precise strike to the elbow and a knee to the solar plexus. Carter, seeing his partner go down, hesitated. It was all the time Reacher needed. A swift jab to the throat and Carter was on the ground, gasping for air. Reacher didn't kill them, but he made sure they wouldn't be following him again for a while. He left them there, groaning in the dirt. That night, he returned to the mill. This time, he was prepared. He avoided the main gate and found a section of the fence that was weaker, rusted through at the bottom. He slipped inside, a shadow among shadows. He moved towards a series of large storage sheds that seemed to be the focus of the late-night activity. The air grew thick with a sharp, acrid smell. He found a window, grimy with years of neglect, and peered inside. The shed was filled with barrels, hundreds of them, stacked high. They were marked with chemical hazard symbols. This was no construction site. It was a dumping ground for illegal toxic waste. Thorne was poisoning his own town, the land his family had supposedly nurtured for generations, all for a profit, and Miller had found out. A noise from behind made him spin around. A guard stood there, shotgun raised. "Don't move!" the man snarled. Reacher's mind worked instantly. The guard was jumpy, his finger twitching on the trigger. Reacher feigned compliance, raising his hands slowly, but as he did, he kicked out, a powerful, precise motion that sent a loose pile of scrap metal clattering to the ground. The guard flinched at the sound, his aim wavering for a split second. It was enough. Reacher lunged, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. He grabbed the shotgun, twisting it out of the guard's hands. The man was big, but Reacher was faster, stronger, and infinitely more skilled. A series of short, disabling blows, and the guard was unconscious on the floor. Reacher knew he was running out of time. He had to find something concrete, something he could use to expose Thorne. He moved deeper into the facility, towards a small office building at the back. The door was locked. He kicked it in. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent night. Inside, the office was messy, but a computer was on. It was password protected, but Reacher had a knack for guessing the things people thought were clever. He tried Devereaux, Thorne Industries, password 123, nothing. Then he tried Legacy. The screen flickered and opened to the desktop. Thorne was a man obsessed with his family's name. He found what he was looking for in a hidden folder. Shipping manifests, payment records, emails. It was all there. A detailed log of illegal chemical waste shipments from all over the country, dumped right here in Devereaux. The payments were laundered through the mill redevelopment project. And there was another file, a list of names. Local people, officials, the sheriff himself, all on Thorne's payroll. Miller's name was on a separate list, under the heading Loose Ends. Sadie's name was right below it. He heard the sound of approaching vehicles, the crunch of tires on gravel. Thorne's cavalry was arriving. Reacher quickly copied the files onto a small USB drive he found in a desk drawer. He had the proof. Now he just had to get out alive. He slipped out the back of the office as headlights flooded the front. He could hear Thorne's voice, sharp and angry. "Find him! He's here somewhere! I want him dead!" Reacher didn't run. He hunted. He used the labyrinth of rusted machinery and decaying buildings to his advantage, picking off Thorne's men one by one. He was a phantom, striking from the darkness and disappearing before they could react. A blow to the back of the neck here, a disarmed thug there. He was an army of one, dismantling Thorne's private militia. The final confrontation took place in the main processing plant of the old mill. Reacher had taken down all of Thorne's men. Only the man himself was left. Thorne stood on a catwalk high above the factory floor, a hunting rifle in his hands. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Thorne shouted, his voice echoing in the vast space. "This town was nothing before I came along. I gave it a future." "You gave it a graveyard," Reacher called back, his voice a low, menacing growl from the shadows below. "You poisoned the water, the land, and you killed a good soldier who found out. Miller was a fool. He should have taken the money." Thorne raised the rifle, aiming into the darkness. "You're just like him, a man with a death wish." He fired, the shot ricocheting off a steel beam near Reacher's head. Reacher didn't flinch. He was already moving, climbing a nearby ladder, his movements swift and silent. He emerged on the catwalk behind Thorne. Thorne spun around, his eyes wide with shock. He tried to bring the rifle to bear, but Reacher was too close. Reacher disarmed him with a single, fluid motion, sending the rifle clattering to the floor below. Thorne was a businessman, not a fighter. He was soft, arrogant, and terrified. He threw a wild punch which Reacher caught easily in his massive hand. "It's over, Thorne," Reacher said, his voice cold. "You can't prove anything," Thorne spat, trying to pull his hand free. "This town belongs to me. The sheriff, the judge, they all work for me." "Not anymore," Reacher said. He pulled Thorne close, their faces inches apart. "You made a mistake. You killed my brother's friend, and you threatened his sister." Reacher didn't kill him. That would have been too easy. He incapacitated him with a precise, non-lethal strike and left him there on the catwalk. He walked out of the mill as the first sirens began to wail in the distance. He had made an anonymous call to the state police and the FBI, directing them to the evidence on Thorne's computer and the USB drive he'd left with Sadie, telling her to give it to the first agent who didn't have a local accent. He walked down the same road Hale and Carter had pointed him to, not looking back. The sun was rising, casting a pale light over Devereaux. The town would heal eventually. The corruption would be rooted out. Justice, in its own slow, grinding way, would be served. Reacher didn't wait to see it. He had a bus to catch. He was a ghost, leaving no trail, only the echoes of a reckoning. He had found the truth for Sergeant Miller, and that was enough. He walked on, the road stretching out before him, a new horizon waiting. The past was behind him, where it belonged. He never looked back. He didn't have to. The silence he left in his wake was louder than any explosion. It was the sound of justice. He reached the highway and stuck out his thumb. A truck slowed, its air brakes hissing. Reacher climbed in, the driver nodding once. He was just another traveler, heading somewhere, anywhere else. The chapter of Devereaux was closed. As the truck pulled away, he glanced in the side mirror. The town was already shrinking, becoming a memory. He thought about Joe, about Miller, about the endless fight. Some men ran from trouble. Reacher ran towards it. It was who he was. The road was his home, and justice was his only destination. He settled back in his seat, the rumble of the engine a familiar lullaby, and watched the miles disappear. The world was full of towns like Devereaux, full of men like Thorne, and as long as it was, Jack Reacher would never be out of a job. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to rest. Just for a moment. The next town was waiting.